It's 2001 on a Saturday, and you're scooting around on your driveway with your Razor scooter, just taking the occasional break to grab your little juicy fruit and just, sit down, play some Pokemon Yellow with your Game Boy. You're just passing the time because your parents are getting you ready to go see the infamous Fast and Furious movie, which features some no-name guy that was in like a beach movie, and then some other dude with no hair that you haven't really seen since the Chronicles of Riddick days, maybe. I'm not entirely sure if that's actually chronologically accurate, but anyway. You go to the theater, sit down with your Milk Duds, your popcorn, and you stare at the screen, amazed at the iconic lime green eclipse that appears and spins out for no apparent reason, but you don't really know that at the time, so it was really just the coolest thing in the world to you. Throughout the movie, there are S2000s, Civics, RX-7s, Supras, Integras, Hydro, pretty much anything that you could possibly imagine that was put onto a car in the early 2000s was in that movie, and you couldn't be happier about it. And although your dad is more of a muscle car guy and you've got a Mustang sitting in the garage, you have found a newfound love for the car community that it just happens to be related to JDM. You obviously can't drive yet, but that doesn't stop you from the fact that you're planning on owning one of those cars as your dream car when you eventually turn 16 years old. And in the meantime, you end up picking up the Need for Speed trilogy and all the Most Wanted and the Underground and everything in between so that you can go deck your thing out with underglow, with the body kits, with the wings, with the HKS stickers, with everything you could possibly imagine on your car, because that was the coolest shit ever. And that was 18 years ago. So why is JDM so popular? The reality is that the JDM scene was around a few decades before you fell in love with it. Back in the 80s, the US domestic market was flooded with boats. You had these big old cars with big old V8s in them. They weren't really that practical, they weren't efficient, and they weren't the most reliable things in the world either. There was also the issue of emissions, which restricted a lot of our domestic cars. They tried slapping 50 catalytic converters on them to resolve the issues, but that just didn't cut it, because the EPA are cutthroat monsters that don't like to let anybody have any fun ever. Sorry, California. Enter Japanese cars. I mean, with their smaller size, they have more efficient engines, new styling. People couldn't scoop them up fast enough. I mean, you had cars like the Datsun, the Starion, the Supra, the Celica, and people wanted a car they could just get in and not have to think about if it would get them to the destination without dying. Everyone was used to big cars that could go fast in a straight line, and not really cars that you could feel the road. Gone was the bench seating and big bulky bodies with their loud engines, and in their nimble, quick, and improved replacement, a car for the Japanese market. At the time, the domestic market had never seen anything like this before, and they couldn't really keep up either. Fast forward to the 90s, where we started to see some of the most iconic cars in existence come to appear. We started seeing cars like the R34, the Supra, the RX-7, all of which are probably some of your dream cars still to this day. Once JDM cars got their jump start with the general public, enthusiasts started to take notice. With their iconic styling and engines, other than, a V8, the world in the future became iconic with other motors like the 2JZ, the 4G63, the RB26, everything else you could possibly imagine with numbers and letters and things. Not only were their engines different, but they had a ton of technology that was pretty much, way far ahead of the domestic cars, for example. And I don't mean to bag on our domestic guys, but the 3000 GT was one of the first cars ever to offer four-wheel steering. They also had active aero. They also had active dynamic suspension things. I mean, let's not talk about the fact that pretty much every single one of those options broke in the 3000 GT, but when it came off the line, it worked, and it was really cool. These engines could also efficiently use turbochargers without causing engine failure, and the engines could hold pretty much a good chunk of power from the factory, so you wouldn't necessarily need to have to upgrade the internals if you wanted to make big power. Oh, yeah, and they made really cool noises. They were light years ahead of the USDM market, so they naturally became the next big thing. Not to mention, there were so many freaking choices for imports. When it came to domestic cars, you had 3, which really isn't much more than today. You had Ford, GM, and Dodge as your main flagship domestic competitors. Maybe Chevy was in the mix there for a little bit of time, but whatever. It was a combination of all of these things that caused such a boom in the late 90s and far into the 2000s. There were magazines on it, video games, Hot Wheels, other toys, movies, you name it. JDM scene was plastered all over and being shoved down your throat. PG, YouTube, monetization, not doing a simile there. You guys remember, like, you'd go in, Need for Speed Underground, you'd get hit with like the Lil Jon beat happening in the background, just like get low, get low. Need for Speed Underground 2 came out, and then it was an open map. Do you remember that?
Wow, the land of make-believe.
You could go anywhere, and then the nitrous, you'd jump off things. You had, I don't really think you could drift, and then you had Need for Speed Most Wanted, and Most Wanted was like, it was so good. It was like the best video game to ever hit for like automotive enthusiasts. I still remember getting into that game and then just going to the part where you could do hot pursuit or whatever it was, where the cops already were on you, and I would just race for like hours to see how long I could stay in pursuit without getting caught. My record was like 58 minutes, by the way, in case you guys wanna try and beat that. At the time, magazines like Super Street played a huge part in the growth of the tuner culture. The internet wasn't really much of like anything yet. When people wanted information, they would have to turn to magazines because, you know, that's just how the world worked in the early 2000s. And I mean, you kind of had a couple forums, but nobody really cared that much. That's how people learned. They read about it in a magazine. It wasn't like an article on Facebook or a Google search, but you get the point. Not only that, but if you wanted to know what other cool people were doing with their cars, you had to look at a magazine. If you wanted to know what parts they had, you went and looked at the magazine. If you wanted to buy said parts, you bought them from the magazine. Magazines, they were the future. And now they're not. RIP. And that's what a lot of us loved about the JDM car scene. We were pretty much very young at the time. I had no facial hair, and now look at me. Things have changed. It's pretty much nostalgic to us because of the fact on how the cars handle power, their massive aftermarket platform, and the aesthetic. I mean, it's pretty much the perfect storm. It was because of this huge culture shift and the love for imports that caused their aftermarket community to explode. And now you saw all these cars with like the body kits, underglow, big wings, hood scoops, and the rolling around 5 Zygens and OZ rally wheels. By the way, if you're looking for some wheels, tires, suspension, check out fitmentindustries.com. You can check it all out. Everything you possibly want, lowering springs, air suspension, you know. Even when you look at a lot of the older JDM cars without necessarily going straight into the body kits, they've aged pretty okay when you look at them. It's not really something you can say about a lot of older cars, because if you look at older cars, they look pretty rough. To this day, enthusiasts are still taking cues from the Japanese styling and trends, and although it may be different from what we saw in the early 2000s, it's still around. It's just transformed into a whole new animal. The days of chrome are gone, and now we see obnoxious body kits and insane camber along with big wings and underglow, because it's all about having an aggressive car that looks fast but doesn't actually go that quick. Sorry. Overall, imports are still popular for so many reasons, and in our opinion, they will continue to be a very popular option just because of the fact of they hit popularity when we were young. Duh. And a lot of times, that's okay. It's okay to like popular things. Just because a lot of people like popular things doesn't mean you don't have to like said popular thing. That's what makes you a hipster, which is okay. It's okay to like things other people like. Just letting you know. JDM scene is one of those scenes that has actually turned from a JDM true scene to probably like a JDM US DM scene if you actually want to get into the specifics of it, but that is something for an entirely different video. So we hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe if you're looking for wheels, tires, suspension, fitmentindustries.com. Please drop a comment on what you'd like to see us talk about next. I'm Alex from Fitment Industries. I have breathed twice in this entire video, and we will see you later. Peace.